Battlefield 6 is about to do something massive for its audience. Now, whether you're somebody who was completely sold by the multiplayer reveal event and you're excited about the game you're going to play later this year, or if you're somebody who's still a little bit on the fence, objectively, what is coming in the pipeline and what has been announced is some pretty cool news. We'll be going into all of the details in this video, so make sure you drop a like and a subscribe. We're super close to 200,000 subs and it would mean a lot. But at a very basic level, on top of some changes, Battlefield has announced that they will be bringing fan-favorite maps back to the franchise in Battlefield 6. We're going to dive into that in all of its detail, including some potential leaks around the game which may point towards this already being the case shortly. But there's also been some very interesting news surrounding balancing in the game and quick fixes that didn't make it into the build that we played in Los Angeles and the beta build that you are playing this week. Drunksy, or Florian, who is one of the lead game designers on Battlefield 6 and a former Battlefield professional player, has announced that the scope glint in the game is going to be toned down in Battlefield 6 and that it's just a change that didn't make it into this build, and that they're also monitoring a number of balancing features, including the fact that suppression in this game stops health regeneration. Yes, you've heard that correctly. If you suppressive fire somebody who is behind cover, health regen on that character does not happen unless somebody else administers the health regeneration. Not getting health regen whilst being suppressed is somewhat of a controversial decision, especially when you consider some of the more CQB maps, your sort of Siege of Kairos, your Empire States, where Metro and Locker style scenarios tend to unfold in short spaces. So the idea that nobody in that area may health regen unless somebody does it for them is a little bit daunting, but this is something that they are willing to change and something that they are monitoring throughout the beta, and they basically said this is what the beta is for. This will likely be one of a number of changes that is going to happen between now and launch, and things that are continually going to be tested not only in the beta but also in Battlefield Labs. Now let's talk about these fan favorite maps. Now, whilst I was at the LA event, there were a number of proxy events that took place across the world, in London and in Hong Kong. A Taiwanese media group who attended the show interviewed the development director for Battlefield, Anna Neverick, and they said that Battlefield Studios will introduce classic versions or maps based on fan or player requests. She went on to explain that they want to choose the best possible one to bring back the good old days of playing Battlefield. And further to that, one of the gameplay designers also said that Portal's new Forge-like tools would allow players to create their own game ideas and versions of these maps as well. Now, we know at this moment in time that Battlefield is going to release with 9 maps, and one of the fan favorites returning in that is Operation Firestorm. Operation Firestorm, without a shadow of a doubt, is one of the fan favorite maps of all time, and something that I was extremely pleased to see return to the game. But in some of the initial quote-unquote leaks of Battlefield 6, some people said that there would be even more maps, up to 14, and whilst I always take these with a pinch of salt because they seem to be inaccurate, I was very interested to see that Propaganda was one of the maps that was listed in these alleged leaks. Now, I don't think you should believe these leaks, and until they're validated by an official source, I think they're mostly something you could ignore. But Propaganda is a very interesting one because it's not an obvious choice. If they said, oh yeah, Operation Metro and Operation Locker is coming back, then I'd be like, oh yeah, this leak is a total lie and shouldn't be believed at all. But Propaganda is a very specific map, one that honestly was extremely underrated, and if you played Battlefield 4 and you played Propaganda, you know that it's one of the best infantry-based maps, and honestly vehicle to infantry-based maps that Battlefield 4 had. It was high intensity, had lots of cover, really good flanking routes, featured some of the best CQB gunplay in Battlefield 4, while still allowing a small amount of infantry vehicles to roam around the map and be problematic. So to me, that probably gives these leaks a tiny bit more credentials. Not enough that I'm willing to say that they're definitely true, but enough that it feels as though this is a map that could come in the future. Now, there are some very obvious choices in Battlefield's history that would return to Battlefield 6, Operation Metro being one of them, Noshahr Canals as a fan favorite, Seine Crossing and Grand Bazaar also being classics. I've seen a lot of love for Siege of Shanghai as a result of Battlefield 4 recently, but there's even some previous maps like the Strike at Karkin stuff, Gulf of Oman, maps that are really iconic in this series and franchise, and good god, the word Karkin at this point is basically synonymous with the word remaster in Battlefield's history. Every map you can think of from pretty much every Battlefield title has pretty much one iconic map or a handful of them that people would love to see return to the game. I've mentioned Strike at Karkin before, but Damavan Peak is a great example, Ballroom Blitz from Battlefield 1, Arica Harbor in Battlefield Bad Company 2, Port Valdez in Bad Company 2. There are so many maps, and we haven't even talked about things like Dawnbreaker, Zavod, some of the more Battlefield 4 maps, or even some of the expansion maps. I mean, I play Siege of Cairo, and to me, Siege of Cairo immediately feels like the Aftermath DLC from Battlefield 3. The collection of maps available for these developers to choose from is absolutely massive, and I hope that they don't just go for the obvious ones. I hope they don't just go for the obvious Operation Metros. I hope they really branch out, consider some of the DLC maps that were also super successful and really popular, because in my view, a lot of the historic Battlefield maps, both the base game maps, but more so some of the DLC maps, really captured what made the franchise special. Paracel Storm is a great example of a default map that I feel brought combined arms warfare to Battlefield very well, but like I mentioned, that Aftermath DLC for Battlefield 3 I think was really special, and even some of the China Rising stuff was also fantastic, and seeing some of those be tossed aside would be a huge shame for this franchise when even the expansion maps were fantastic. There are some maps that haven't had many, if any, remasters at all. Grand Bazaar was only ever remastered once for Battlefield Hardline, which wasn't arguably the franchise's most played game, and Telemarket, for example, from Battlefield 3 Aftermath, has never seen any kind of follow-up, despite it being one of the most popular maps from that DLC. The next thing that this branches off to, which I believe is something that the gameplay designer who had this interview alluded to, is the potential for Portal. Now, Battlefield Portal inevitably is going to be using assets that exist inside Battlefield 6. It's not going to be like 2042's Portal, where they add specific assets that are specifically only for different time periods of different Battlefield titles. This is an editor tool, or a Forge-like tool, that is essentially going to allow you to take everything in the game and use it kind of willy-nilly to create your own environments, your own setups, your own custom map placements, your own modes, and pretty much anything you want to the most part of what's capable in the Godot editor. But what's really interesting about this, and what a lot of people haven't really thought about, is that there's absolutely nothing stopping Battlefield from releasing blank maps. And what I mean by that is that the community can vote on a certain layout of a 64-player map, whether that's a circular map that's rounded a little bit like Goldman Railway, or a more linear map that's a little bit more face-to-face like Operation Metro, and then simply allowing you guys the ability to go into the Godot editor for Battlefield Portal, use the assets inside Battlefield 6, and create your own bespoke maps. Even if, with the Godot editor, a handful of people or a singular person creates a fairly polished version of an older map, or even a brand new community map that they have made from scratch, there is not a lot in the way of EA to stop them from going into the Godot editor, taking what's been made, polishing it, refining it with different lighting, artwork, maybe updating some of the buildings to be different to the base game, and bringing it into the official branch of the game. The genius of the Battlefield editor is that allowing this to happen with Portal means that they're effectively recruiting their own army of modders. They are recruiting their own army of map creators who could work in tandem with development teams, and they're also recruiting their own army of mode makers and fun experience makers. Now, whether or not any of this is going to be monetizable, whether or not there is going to be a pipeline system legally and monetarily that allows EA to take these creations and use them in-game, those are slightly bigger question marks, but I'm confident that they've had these conversations, and I'm confident they have already thought about this. I know some people are a little bit worried that there will be a distinction between the base game and Portal in terms of what is created, but this allows people the freedom to try things that are a little bit out there, things that are a little bit wacky, and things that are a little bit different. And honestly, Battlefield as a franchise, despite the fact that it's going back to its roots in the base game, and recently was described as heavily inspired by Bad Company 2 by some of the lead development team, it kind of gives them free realm in a slightly separate segment of the game to try things a little bit different and see if people like it, whether that's a super CQB map or a super massive map with loads of different spaces. You know, this is their playground as much as our playground to try different things, and I genuinely believe in a short matter of time, you are going to see a large number of custom creations from the audiences that may be ported into the base game from EA and DICE themselves. And on top of that, we haven't even had the discussion about what would happen if Battlefield Portal is in any way compatible with the alleged battle royale that is on the horizon. Now, seemingly this entire game is sharing a codebase, which is why everything is leaking left, right, and center, and there doesn't seem to be lots of separation in terms of the game files. So in my view, other than hardware limitations and memory limitations, there's probably very little stopping the developers of Battlefield 6 from allowing some degree of customization in the battle royale experience via Portal, whether that's simply using segments of the map or smaller parts of the map, or in fact creating entire custom modes and rule sets that could be utilized in the Battle Royale, it really does feel as though the sky is the limit for this tool, and how much we get out of it just depends on the tool set that's available in launch. But from what we've heard so far and the communications we've had from Battlefield, that appears to be in a very healthy or heading in a very healthy direction. Now, the final thing is, of course, the changes to Assault, which some of you have probably noticed at this point in time. The Assault class has now been given something called a redeploy beacon, which was the respawn beacon on Recon that has now been taken away from Recon. I think this is a very interesting and credible move. It has a limited number of uses and only a few of them could be placed on the map, and it basically allows the Assault class to be more of a frontline pusher. Whereas historically, I found that the issue with the Recon class and why that shouldn't have the respawn beacon is that most of them end up sitting back and camping, and most of them end up using those beacons for themselves to get back into camping spots that they were already utilizing. So this is a pretty big fundamental change. I don't think we've ever seen the respawn beacon really trade hands like this from a class to a class, and I'm glad that they're testing it in the beta. You know, this is something that could be reverted if people are against it, or something that could be accelerated with different changes to different classes, and it's going to help some of these classes find their feet. I do feel that this leaves the Recon class in a bit of a questionable space, and doesn't really have a clear identity of what it is or what it's supposed to be doing, although they did recently add the addition that going prone unspots Recon players. There's just a few more things in terms of equipment that I feel could occur for the Recon class. I do feel like the equipment toolset for pretty much all of the classes in this game is quite generally undefined at the minute, and other than support having a very clear role and engineer having a very clear role, it feels as though Recon and Assault are kind of two ends of the opposite spectrum, where nobody quite knows what these classes are supposed to be doing. Now, it seems ostensibly more clear that the Assault class is a frontline pusher, but it also now means that the Recon class seemingly has little to no identity at all. So I'll be curious to see what the outcome is and what changes happen after the beta once you guys have played it and given your feedback to the development teams. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section down below, folks. I'm really fascinated to hear what your favorite Battlefield map is. It could be Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, it could be any of the maps that you've played from any Battlefield that could be modernized and taken into a 2027 setting. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe, we're on the road to 200k, and I'll catch you again in the next one.